Who repaired my armor? The alien queen demanded. A lone human engineer answered. The repair bay smelled like burnt metal and something worse, something biological, sharp and acidic, the kind of scent that clung to the inside of your nose for hours. Nathan Cole did not flinch when the doors slammed open behind him. He was elbow-deep in a panel of crystalline circuitry that no human hand was supposed to touch, and he had exactly 4 minutes before the entire Vokai battle suit powered back down into dormancy. Step away from the armor. The voice came from 3 soldiers at once. He recognized the Vokai command cadence, short, stacked syllables meant to be obeyed before the mind caught up. Nathan did not step away. "Give me 90 seconds, he said. He heard the sound of weapons being raised. 3 distinct mechanical clicks, each one a different pitch. 90 seconds, he repeated, his voice flat and steady, not because he was brave but because he had already run the numbers and had decided that getting shot was the worst outcome. The resonance coil in the left pauldron is cracked along the 3rd harmonic layer. If you power this suit on right now, the feedback will cook the neural link. Whoever wears it will be dead in under a minute." Silence. He finished the last connection, sealed the panel and stepped back, pulling his tools with him in one practiced sweep. The suit hummed. The deep amber glow along its spine brightened, steadied and held, not a flicker, not a surge. Nathan turned around. The 3 soldiers had not lowered their weapons. "I'm Nathan Cole," he said. "I'm the human maintenance contractor assigned to Deck 7. I heard the suit go into fault mode when I was passing the corridor. I fixed it." He paused. "You're welcome." The soldier in the center, a Vokai male, nearly 8 feet tall, with a ridge of bioluminescent markings running from his jaw to his collarbone, tilted his head at a very specific angle. Nathan had learned enough about Vokai body language to know that angle meant he was being measured. Not threatened. Measured. "The Queen's armor," the soldier said slowly, "is not to be touched by non-Vokai hands." "Then the Queen's armor would have killed the Queen," Nathan replied. He pointed at the sealed panel. 3rd harmonic resonance fracture. It is a manufacturing defect specific to the 7th generation Pauldron series. I have filed 3 separate technical notices about it with the Vokai Supply Bureau over the past year. All 3 were rejected. He let that sit in the air. "I have the receipts." Another silence, longer this time. The center soldier lowered his weapon first. The other 2 followed a half-second later, which told Nathan the first one was in charge. "You will remain here," the soldier said. "I have nowhere else to be," Nathan answered. He sat down on a supply crate, pulled out a small thermos of coffee, and waited. The coffee was cold. It had been cold since breakfast. He drank it anyway. 14 minutes later, the doors opened again, and Queen Vara Salin walked in. She was taller than her soldiers, which Nathan had not expected. The reports he had read described her as average height for a Vokai female, but the reports had been wrong, or the word average meant something different in whatever dialect had been translated. She moved the way very few people moved, without any apparent awareness of the space she occupied, which was the surest sign that she owned every room she entered. Her armor was the one Nathan had just repaired, and it caught the light of the repair bay in long, shifting bands of deep gold and black. She stopped 6 feet from him and looked at the armor, then at him, then at the armor again. "Who repaired my armor?" she said, not loudly. She did not need to be loud. Nathan stood up. "I did." "A human?" "Yes." Her eyes moved over him the way a craftsman's eyes move over unfamiliar material, not with contempt, but with genuine appraisal. He noticed she had very still hands. That was another thing the reports had gotten wrong. "Show me the fault," she said. He walked her through it. He did not simplify. He did not explain it as though she would not understand the technical language. He used the exact terminology, showed her the diagnostic readout on his handheld scanner, and pointed to the fracture pattern on the 3rd harmonic coil that was now sealed but still visible on the scan image. She looked at the image for a long time. How did you know this was the fault? She asked. Because I have seen it 7 times in the past 2 years, he said. Always the 7th generation pauldron, always the left side, always the 3rd coil. It is a stress fracture that develops under repeated high-temperature discharge. The manufacturing spec did not account for the cumulative thermal load during sustained combat operations. He met her eyes. Whoever your armorer is, they are not bad at their job. The fault is upstream. It is in the design. Queen Vara Salen was quiet for a very long moment. My armorer, she said, died 3 weeks ago. Nathan did not look away. I'm sorry. He was the only one who understood my armor well enough to maintain it at campaign pace. I understand, Nathan said. And then, because he was Nathan Cole and he had never been good at saying the safe thing when the honest thing was sitting right there, I can maintain it, if you want. Her head moved at that same measuring angle the soldier had used, but on her it meant something different. He was not sure what yet. You are a contractor, she said. Your commission is to Deck 7. My commission is to whatever Deck 7's commanding officer assigns me to, he replied. And right now, Deck 7's commanding officer is you. She looked at him one more time, long, steady, and unreadable. Then she turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold she stopped without turning. Report to my armory at the 6th bell, she said. And bring your receipts. Nathan Cole picked up his thermos, his tools, and his scanner. The coffee was still cold. He drank the rest of it on the way out and did not let himself smile until he was alone in the corridor. He had a feeling things were about to get very complicated. He also had a feeling he was going to be good at it. Nathan arrived at the 6th bell with 2 minutes to spare, which he had calculated deliberately. Arriving early would have looked eager. Arriving late would have looked disrespectful. 2 minutes early was the margin of a professional who had somewhere else to be but chose to be here first. The armory of Queen Vara Salen was not what he expected. He had worked on enough alien military hardware to develop a rough mental template of what a high-ranking commander's personal armory looked like. Racks of ceremonial weapons, display cases, trophies, the kind of visual language that said power and history and legacy all at once. The Volkai were known for exactly that kind of aesthetic. Their architecture leaned hard into the monumental. This room was a workshop. Every surface was a working surface. Tools hung on the walls in careful arrangements, grouped by function and then by size, the way a surgeon lays out an operating theater. There were 3 suit stands in the center of the room, each holding different components of battle armor at different stages of maintenance. Cables ran between diagnostic terminals in neat, deliberate paths. A low hum came from somewhere in the walls, a thermal regulation system, he guessed, keeping the ambient temperature at the precise range that Volkai alloys preferred during maintenance. The late armorer had been serious about his work. Nathan could see it in everything the room still held. He stood near the door and waited. A Volkai female came out of the back section. Not the queen, but younger, maybe in her late hundreds by Volkai reckoning, which put her somewhere around the equivalent of a human in her mid-20s. She had a smear of lubricant on her jaw and a diagnostic tablet in her hand, and she stopped when she saw Nathan with an expression that communicated, clearly and without words, that she had not been told he was coming. I am Sira, she said. I was apprenticed to the royal armorer. Her tone had the careful flatness of someone deciding, in real time, how much to reveal. Nathan Cole, he said, maintenance contractor Deck 7. I know who you are, she said. You are the human who touched the Queen's armor. I am the human who fixed the Queen's armor, he said, not aggressively, just precisely. There is a difference. Sira looked at him for a long moment, then looked at his tool case, then back at him. Whatever she was calculating, she finished calculating it quickly. Salen arrives in 20 minutes, she said. The right vambrace has a stress fracture in the second mounting bracket. I have not been able to isolate it because the diagnostic returns a clean reading when the suit is not under load. Nathan set his case down and opened it. How many hours of combat load before you started seeing symptoms? About 60. The bracket is stiff during articulation warm-up, but once the suit reaches operational temperature, the reading clears and the stiffness goes away. Because the metal expands under heat and temporarily closes the fracture, Nathan said. He picked up his contact scanner, a small device about the size of his palm, designed for microstructure analysis. It will not show on a diagnostic unless you scan it under a simulated load environment. Do you have a load emulator? Sierra pointed at a machine in the corner that Nathan had assumed was a calibration rig. That is what it is designed for, she said. I have not been able to make it interface with the suit correctly. He crossed the room and looked at the emulator. It was Vokai hardware, 3rd generation, and the interface protocol it was designed for had been updated 2 versions ago. The suit was running 5th generation firmware. They were not speaking the same language. Have you got a crosslink bridge? He asked. Sierra opened a cabinet, searched for a moment, and handed him a device he recognized from a completely different system. It was Dravith manufactured, used for interspecies equipment communication, and most Vokai engineers would not have known what it was. Where did you get a Dravith bridge? He asked. The late armorer was resourceful, she said. There was something in her voice when she said it. Not grief exactly, but the shape left behind by grief. Nathan nodded, said nothing about it, and got to work. It took him 11 minutes to get the emulator talking to the suit. He had to write 2 short bridge routines on the fly, which he did on his handheld, transferring them to the Dravith bridge via a direct cable link because wireless handshaking between the 2 systems was a mess of conflicting encryption protocols. Sierra watched him the entire time. She did not ask questions while he was working, which told him she understood when questions were useful and when they were interference. That was a quality he respected. When the emulator came online and the suit responded under simulated load, the fracture lit up on the contact scanner immediately. Visible, clear, exactly where she had suspected it. There, he said, and handed her the scanner. She looked at the reading and was quiet for a moment. I would have found it eventually, she said. Yes, he agreed, but now you have it in 12 minutes instead of however long it would have taken. She looked up at him. You are not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who would tell me I was doing it wrong. You were not doing it wrong, he said. You were working with inadequate tools. There is a difference. He paused. That distinction matters a lot to me, and I suspect it mattered to your armorer as well. Sierra was quiet again. Then she pulled up a stool and sat down next to the emulator. The fracture, how do we repair it? He sat down across from her, and they got to work. When Queen Vara Solin arrived 19 minutes later, she found the 2 of them 3 steps into the repair, talking quietly about thermal expansion coefficients and the specific grain structure of 7th generation Vokai battle alloy. She stood in the doorway for a moment and watched. Neither of them noticed her right away. She noticed that Sierra's posture, which had been tight and careful and armored in its own way since her mentor's death, was different now. She was leaning forward slightly. She was engaged. Solin waited until there was a natural pause in their conversation, then stepped into the room. You found the Vambrace fault, she said. Sierra found it, Nathan said. I just brought the right tool. Solin looked at Sierra, who met her eyes and nodded slightly, a gesture that in Vokai custom meant, what he said is accurate. The Queen walked to the suit stand and looked at the bracket they were working on. How long for the repair? 2 hours, Sierra said, maybe less. And the suit will be fully operational. Yes, Nathan said, but he paused. Solin turned to look at him. In her culture, interrupting a queen was somewhere between insulting and catastrophic depending on the context. She had not decided which it was yet. Speak. The entire 7th generation series has this issue, he said. The pauldron fault I found this morning and this Vambrace fracture are both symptoms of the same upstream design problem. The alloy composition and the load modeling in the 7th generation assumed a specific operational profile that does not match how your armor is actually being used. High frequency, high temperature combat sustained over long campaigns. He held her gaze. If we only fix these two things and do nothing else, we will be doing this again in another 60 to 80 hours of operation. And the next failure might not be one I happen to walk past in time. The room was very quiet. "What are you proposing?" the Queen asked. "A full structural audit," Nathan said. "Every component scanned under load, mapped against the correct operational profile, then a prioritized repair and reinforcement schedule." He set his scanner down on the workbench. "It will take time. But it will mean that your armor does not fail at the wrong moment." Vara Salin stood with her very still hands at her sides and looked at this small, serious, honest human engineer in her dead armorer's workshop. "How much time?" she said. "Depends on what we find," he answered, "but I am not going anywhere." She considered him for 3 full seconds. That was, by Vokai standards, a long time to consider anything. "Begin the audit," she said. The audit took 4 days, and in those 4 days Nathan Cole learned 3 things that would change the shape of everything that came after. The first thing he learned was that Vokai battle armor was, underneath all of its alien engineering language and unfamiliar alloy compositions, built on principles he understood at a fundamental level. Load distribution, stress management, thermal regulation, material fatigue, these were not alien concepts. They were physics. Physics did not change because the species building the armor was different. What changed was the specific solutions each species arrived at and the assumptions baked into those solutions. Nathan had always been good at reading assumptions. It was the part of engineering that most people called intuition and he called pattern recognition. The second thing he learned was that Sira was exceptional. She had been trained by someone who cared deeply about the work, and that training had given her a precision and a patience that was rare in engineers twice her experience level. What she lacked was exposure. She had been trained on Vokai systems, by Vokai methodology, inside a single tradition. She had not yet learned that some problems look different when you come at them from outside the tradition that created them. Nathan spent 3 of the 4 days quietly showing her that, and she spent 3 of the 4 days being a faster learner than anyone he had worked with in years. The third thing he learned was harder to name. It had to do with the Queen. Vara Salin came to the armory every evening. Not to supervise, she never hovered, never second-guessed, never asked the kind of questions that were really about control. She came the way someone comes to a place that matters to them, and she usually stayed for an hour, sometimes 2, sitting in a chair near the back wall with reports and dispatches in her hands, working through her own business while Nathan and Sira worked through theirs. Occasionally she would ask a question, always a precise one, never small talk. On the 3rd evening, she set down her reports and asked Nathan to explain the audit results so far. He walked her through it the same way he had walked Sira through it, no simplification, no softening. He used the terminology and showed her the scan maps and pointed to each fault in the order of severity he had assigned it. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You ranked the left shoulder assembly as your highest concern," she said. "Yes. The pauldron you repaired on the first day." "The coil I repaired is fine. The issue is structural, further in. The pauldron repair was necessary and it is holding, but it is sitting on a support architecture that has developed microfractures across 4 of its 7 load points." He pulled up the scan on his tablet and handed it to her. "Here." She looked at the scan for a long time. Something shifted in her expression, not alarm, but something more considered than alarm. "I was in sustained combat 3 days before you found the coil fault," she said. 8 hours. "I know, the scan shows the load history and the crystal stress patterns." He paused. "You were very close to a catastrophic failure." The word catastrophic was a clinical word, and he had used it clinically, but they both understood what it meant in practical terms. She handed the tablet back to him. "My armorer," she said, "noticed the shoulder assembly was beginning to show stress 6 weeks before his death. He was working on a reinforcement plan." "Did he leave notes?" Nathan asked immediately. Something flickered in her expression. "Yes." "I would like to see them," he said, "if you will allow it." She did not answer right away. The notes of a royal armorer were not typically shared outside a very small circle, not because of secrecy exactly, but because of something older than secrecy. They were the record of a personal professional relationship, the accumulated technical conversation between an armorer and the person they protected. They were, in a sense, intimate. "I will consider it," she said. He nodded and went back to work. The next morning, before the 5th bell, a data chip appeared on his workbench with a small card beneath it. The card had 3 characters of Voakai script on it, which Sira translated for him when she arrived. "It means something like, 'Use this well,'" she said, and looked at the chip with an expression that was complicated and private. Nathan plugged in the chip and read the late armorer's notes for 2 hours before the day's work started. The man had been brilliant. His notes were dense and detailed and written in a technical shorthand that took Nathan the better part of the first hour to fully decode. But once he had the key, the picture they painted was extraordinary. He had not just noticed the stress fractures. He had traced them back to their origin in the manufacturing process, identified the specific batch of alloy that had been used in the Queen's current suit, and begun developing a custom reinforcement solution that would have required fabricating entirely new structural components from scratch, using a higher-grade alloy blend that he had already spec'd out. The plan was 60% complete when it stopped. Nathan sat for a moment with that. Then he opened a new document and started where the dead man had left off. He told Sira about it when she arrived. He showed her the plan, the existing notes, and the point where he intended to continue. She read it in silence, and he gave her the time to do that without filling the air. When she looked up, her eyes were very bright, and she blinked once deliberately. "He would have liked you," she said. "He was suspicious of most people, but he liked engineers who read carefully." "He was very good," Nathan said. "Yes," Sira said, "he was." She put the notes down and picked up her tools. "Show me where you are starting." They were 3 hours into the fabrication work for the new shoulder components when Queen Solin appeared at the armory door, earlier than usual and without her guards. She looked at the workbench. She looked at the notes open on the screen. She recognized the structure of the plan. "You are continuing his work," she said. "With your permission," Nathan said. "And the good news is his solution was the right one. I would have arrived at the same place eventually. This just saves us time." She did not say anything for a long moment. She walked to the workbench and looked at the screen, at the design documents, at the new fabrication specs that Nathan had added in his own notation alongside the late armorers. "The alloy blend he spec'd," she said. "Can you source it?" "Already sent the requisition this morning," Nathan said. "Should arrive in 2 days. In the meantime, we can work on the lower assembly reinforcements and have those done before the new material gets here." She turned to look at him. "You sent a materials requisition through my supply chain." "Through Deck 7's standard requisition system," he said. "I marked it Priority 2, if you want me to cancel it." "Priority 2, she repeated. "Priority 1 flags for command review and slows things down," he said. "Priority 2 moves fast, and it is a legitimate maintenance requisition. Every item on it is a real component for a real repair." He met her eyes. "I can send you the full list." She looked at him for another moment with that measuring quality she had. "Send me the list," she said. "Yes." She started to turn away, then stopped. "The fabrication work, how long?" "For the shoulder assembly specifically, 3 days after the material arrives. Full installation and calibration another day." He paused. 5 days total from today, assuming nothing goes wrong. And if something goes wrong, then I find out what it is and I fix it, he said simply. She turned away again. This time she did not stop. Sierra waited until she was gone, then looked at Nathan with an expression that was difficult to read. You are either very confident or very reckless, she said. I prefer thorough, he said, and picked up his fabrication tools. The alloy arrived 37 hours after the requisition went through, which was faster than Nathan had expected and slightly faster than he had told the Queen to expect. He spent a half-hour updating Sierra on his fabrication approach before they started, because the new alloy had specific working characteristics that differed from the standard Volkai batch, and getting those wrong in the early stages would cascade into problems at every step after. Sierra listened, asked 3 very good questions, and then they got to work. The work itself was the kind Nathan liked best. Not a crisis, not a patch, but a proper job, careful, deliberate, building something that was meant to last. The new shoulder assembly was going to be stronger than the original in every meaningful way, more resistant to the specific thermal and mechanical loads that Salen's operational style placed on it, and designed around the actual conditions of sustained campaign use, rather than the optimistic assumptions the original manufacturers had worked from. On the second day of fabrication, something unexpected happened. A Volkai male Nathan had not seen before came into the armory. Not a soldier, his bearing was different, more formal in a way that had nothing to do with rank. He had the hands of a craftsman, fine-scarred and careful, and he moved through the room with the practiced ease of someone who had been in many workshops. You are the human, he said. Nathan Cole, Nathan said. Harek, the man said. I am the lead engineer for the Volkai Military Manufacturing Directorate. He looked at the fabrication work in progress on the bench. The Queen told me what you are doing. Nathan waited. The alloy blend you requisitioned is proprietary, Harek said. The exact specification was developed by our Material Science Division for an entirely different application. I know, Nathan said. Your late armorer noted in his documentation that it would require a modification to the standard blend parameters, specifically, a different heat treatment sequence to optimize the grain structure for this use case. I adjusted the requisition accordingly. Harek blinked. It was the first time his composure had shifted. You modified the blend parameters. The standard blend is optimized for structural hull plating. This application has different requirements, higher flex tolerance, better fatigue resistance in the specific harmonic range that battle armor generates during high-temperature discharge. The modification to the heat treatment sequence compensates for that. Nathan held his gaze. I sent a technical summary with the requisition. Did you receive it? I received it, Harek said slowly. I did not believe it was accurate. Did you check it? A pause. I checked it this morning, after the Queen asked me to. Nathan waited. It is accurate, Harek said. He said it the way someone says something they had not expected to have to say. The reasoning is sound. The modification is valid. He looked at the work on the bench again. Where did you learn Volkai material science? I have been working on Volkai hardware for 11 years, Nathan said. I read everything I can find. The technical literature is excellent when you know where to look. Harek was quiet for a long moment. He walked to the bench and looked at the components in progress, examined the fabrication without touching anything, the way an experienced craftsman looks at another craftsman's work. The late armorer, he said, without looking up, submitted a technical report 2 years ago proposing this exact alloy modification for battle armor applications. The report was rejected by my directorate. Nathan set down his tool. Why? Because it was outside standard parameters. Harek looked up. That is the honest answer. It was outside the familiar range and my team did not have the bandwidth to evaluate it thoroughly, so they defaulted to standard. He paused. He submitted it again 6 months later. It was rejected again. For the same reason. For the same reason. The room was quiet for a moment. He was right, Nathan said, not accusatorially, just clearly. Yes, Herrick said. He was right. He straightened. I would like to observe the remainder of the fabrication if you will allow it. Nathan looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Sira, he said, can you pull up the fabrication log? Start from the alloy preparation stage. Sira pulled it up without comment, and Herrick settled into a chair near the bench, and the work continued. That evening, Queen Solin came to the armory and found Nathan, Sira, and Herrick all three at the bench, deep in a technical discussion about the grain structure imaging they had run at the halfway point of the fabrication. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Three of them, a human engineer, her apprenticed armorer, and the head of her military manufacturing directorate, all bent over the same piece of work, talking in the quick shorthand of people who have found a shared problem interesting enough to forget themselves in it. She did not interrupt. She sat down in her usual chair, picked up her reports, and let them work. Later, after Herrick had gone and Sira had excused herself for the evening, Nathan was cleaning his tools at the bench when he heard the Queen set down her papers. Herrick told me about the rejected reports, she said. Nathan looked up. I suspected something like that. The late armorer's documentation was too thorough to belong to someone who had not been fighting that battle for a while. He never told me. He probably did not want to put you in the middle of it, Nathan said. Internal bureaucratic arguments are complicated when your patron is also the person the bureaucracy reports to. She was quiet for a moment. He protected me from a lot of things he should have told me. People who care about the people they serve tend to do that, Nathan said. It is not always the right call, but it usually comes from the right place. She did not respond to that. She looked at the fabrication components on the bench, the new shoulder assembly, nearly complete, 3 days of careful work made solid and real. It will hold, she said. It was not quite a question. Yes, he said. The full installation will be done tomorrow. Calibration the day after. You can put the armor into full operational use the day after that. He paused. And the next time someone tells you the shoulder assembly is fine when the load numbers look strange, do not believe them. She looked at him with that long measuring quality, and this time something in it was different. Not warmer exactly, but less guarded. I will remember that, she said. The installation took 11 hours. Nathan had estimated 1 day. He had not estimated wrong exactly. 11 hours was within 1 day. But he had not told Sira or the Queen that he expected the last 3 hours to be the hard part, because he had not known until he was in the middle of it. The new shoulder assembly fit correctly. The fabrication was sound. The dimensions were exact. The alloy had responded to the modified heat treatment exactly as he had predicted. The problem was the interface layer, the junction between the new structural components and the older lower arm assembly, which had been built to the original spec, and had developed a set of micro-adjustments over years of use that made the fit tolerances slightly different from the blueprints. Every piece of armor broke in over time. It conformed to the body of the person who wore it, to their movement patterns, their habits, their particular way of generating force. The late armorer had known this and accounted for it in his notes, but knowing it in the abstract and encountering it in the specific were different things. Nathan spent 3 hours making micro-adjustments to the interface fittings. He did it by touch as much as by instrument, feeling the way the components wanted to seat and guiding them toward it. Sira watched and then assisted, her smaller hands useful in the tight spaces of the inner assembly. They did not talk much during those 3 hours. The work required attention. Queen Solin was in full armor for the calibration process, standing on the sensor platform in the center of the room, moving through a prescribed sequence of postures and gestures that tested the suit's response across its full range of motion. She had done this before. The calibration sequence was something the late armorer had designed, and Sira had memorized it and was running it the same way. Nathan watched the diagnostic readouts on 3 simultaneous screens. The shoulder assembly moved. It moved the way well-made things move, with a sureness that does not call attention to itself. No stiffness, no hesitation, no deviation in the load readings. He watched the numbers across the full sequence, and they were consistent and clean and correct. When the sequence finished, he let the silence sit for a moment before he spoke. "The assembly is performing within parameters across all load points," he said. "The thermal regulation is nominal. The resonance signature from the repaired pauldron coil is stable." He looked up from the screens. "The armor is sound." Solin stood on the platform in the armor that had nearly killed her twice in the past month, and for a moment she was very still. Then she removed the helmet and looked at him. "You are certain?" "The numbers are certain," he said. "And the numbers match what I expected them to match, which means either my analysis was correct or I made a very consistent set of errors, and in 11 years of doing this work, that has not happened to me yet." Sierra made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Solin looked at her briefly, then back at Nathan. "I am going to test it," she said. "I would expect nothing less," he said. She was gone for 4 hours. Nathan spent the time writing up the full technical documentation of the repair, every component, every reading, every decision, the fabrication specs, the interface adjustment methodology, all of it. He wrote it in both standard engineering notation and in the format that Volkai Technical Archives used, which he had learned 3 years ago from a software translator, and a great deal of patience. When he was finished, he sent a copy to Sierra and flagged a copy for Harrick's directorate with a note that said this is what the late armorer was trying to build toward, and a copy to the Queen's administrative records. Then he sat down in the chair near the wall, her chair, he realized, and moved to a different one, and read through the late armorer's notes one more time, looking for anything he had missed. He found 2 things. One was a small personal annotation that was not technical at all, a note about the Queen's preference for a slightly lower tension setting on the right gauntlet because of an old injury to her hand that she did not discuss. He adjusted the setting quietly, without mentioning it. The second was a forward-looking section the armorer had titled simply "Next Steps." It was a list of improvements he had intended to begin after the shoulder assembly was resolved. Not urgent repairs, but upgrades, better materials, smarter thermal management, a proposed redesign of the suit's diagnostic layer that would give the wearer real-time structural feedback rather than requiring an external scan. Nathan read that section twice. He was still thinking about it when Queen Solin returned. She came through the armory door and walked directly to the sensor platform and removed the helmet and stood there for a moment. Her expression was different from any he had seen on her before. Not open, exactly, she was not a person who wore things openly, but the particular quality of stillness she carried had changed. The armor had felt right. He could see it. "Well," he said. "Sustained high-temperature discharge for 40 minutes, she said. "Full mobility, 3 combat sequences against training drones at 70% resistance setting." She paused. The left shoulder held. "Yes," he said. "It did not just hold," she said. "It responded faster than before. The load distribution is different." "Better," he said. "The new assembly is more efficient than the original. The forces distribute through a wider cross-section, which means the joint responds with less resistance. You should feel it particularly in extended overhead reach and in the high rotational movement at the beginning of the 3rd combat sequence." She looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said, "exactly there." Sierra was watching both of them from across the room, with an expression that was very carefully neutral. "There is one more thing," Nathan said. He held out the tablet with the late armorer's Next Steps section on the screen. She took it, she read it. She read it for a long time, and whatever she was feeling while she read it was private, and he did not look at her face while she did. When she handed the tablet back, her voice was even. "He was planning all of this." "Yes." You have already started on the diagnostic layer redesign, she said. It was not a question. She had seen enough of how he worked to know. I have ideas, he said. I have not started yet. I wanted to ask first. She looked at him for a long moment. In those long, steady moments, he had learned not to rush her. Ask, she said. Will you let me finish his work? Nathan said. She stood in the armor that now moved the way it should have always moved, in the workshop of the man who had devoted years of his life to this exact project and had not lived to finish it. And she looked at this human engineer with his cold coffee and his careful hands and his 11 years of reading everything he could find. Yes, she said. It was a simple word. It carried a great deal of weight. He nodded once, picked up his tablet and opened a new project file. The next steps section went in first, formatted and organized, and underneath it, in his own notation, he began to write. Outside, the ship moved through the dark between stars. Inside the armory, the work continued. 3 months later, a report passed through the Vauakai Military Engineering Council with a title that no one in the council chambers had expected to see. Cross-species technical collaboration in Royal Armament Systems, a case study. It was co-authored by Nathan Cole, Sira of the Royal Armory, and Harrick of the Military Manufacturing Directorate. It was dense, technical, and precise, and it laid out in careful detail the failures of the 7th-generation battle armor series, the methodology that had been used to identify and correct those failures, and the forward development path for a new approach to battle armor design that incorporated a set of principles the late armorer had been trying to introduce for 2 years before his death. The report cited his original rejected submissions, both of them, by name and by number. The council read it and passed it to their technical review body. The technical review body spent 6 days with it and returned a unanimous recommendation: implement. The 7th-generation series issues were flagged across the entire Vauakai military fleet. The modified alloy blend was approved for standard use. The diagnostic layer redesign that Nathan and Sira had spent 2 months building was cleared for expanded testing. Harrick submitted a formal acknowledgement of the prior rejected reports to the council record. It was a small gesture, bureaucratically speaking. He had been quietly told that it was not required. He submitted it anyway. The night the report was approved, Queen Vara Salen came to the armory at an unusual hour, late, well past the time she normally came. She was not in armor. She was wearing the lighter formal dress of a Vauakai commander off duty, and she came in quietly and sat down in her usual chair. Nathan was still at the bench. He usually was at this hour. The council approved the report, she said. I heard, he said. He had been told by Sira, who had received the notification with a sound that was definitely not a cry and definitely not laughter, but was somewhere between both. The Manufacturing Directorate will begin the fleet-wide 7th-generation audit next month, she said. Good, he said. The diagnostic layer redesign will be ready for wider deployment before then, if the testing proceeds on schedule. Sira has been running it at an impressive pace. Salen was quiet for a moment. She has not left this room before the 13th bell in 6 weeks. She reminds me of the best engineers I have known, Nathan said. She has figured out that the work itself is interesting, and once you figure that out, you do not really want to stop. You taught her that? No, he said. She already knew it. I just gave her harder problems. Salen looked at him with the measuring quality she always had, but there was something different in it now. 3 months of working alongside someone changed the nature of what you were measuring. You were no longer finding out who they were. You were finding out how deep it went. Why did you come back? She asked. After that first day, you fixed the coil, you could have walked away. You are a contractor, there were easier assignments. He set down his tools. He thought about the honest answer, which was several things layered together, and he picked the one that was most true. Because the late armorer's notes were extraordinary, he said, and they were unfinished, and I am very bad at leaving things unfinished." He paused. "And because Sierra needed someone to work next to, and because your armor is interesting, genuinely interesting. The engineering problems in it are the kind that require real thought, and I have not had enough of that in a while." She was quiet for a long moment. "He would have liked you," she said. "He was suspicious of most people." It was almost exactly what Sierra had said, and Nathan thought that the two people who had known the late armorer best had reached the same conclusion independently, which meant it was probably true. "I think I would have liked him too," Nathan said. She did not say anything else for a while. She sat in her chair and he sat at his bench, and outside the ship crossed another stretch of deep dark between stars, and the armory held its quiet hum of thermal regulation, and the low light of working instruments and the completed notes of a dead man who had been right all along, finally given room to become real. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door the way she sometimes did. "The next phase of the diagnostic layer redesign," she said. "The real-time feedback integration. How long?" 6 weeks, he said, "if nothing complicated comes up." "And if something complicated comes up?" He picked up his tools again. "Then we figure out what it is," he said, "and we fix it." She stood in the doorway for one more moment, and something moved in her expression that was not quite a smile, but was in the same country as one. "Yes," she said, "we do." She walked out into the corridor, and the door slid closed behind her, and Nathan Cole turned back to the bench and the work that was waiting, and the armory was quiet, and the hum continued, and it felt, in the way that only the best work ever feels, like exactly the right place to be. End.